Hello, this is Catherine Dubberly, the Answer Lady. Today I want to show you one of the funnest techniques I know for making mock cables or faux cables. It is so incredibly easy and very dramatic, and you can make them on all sorts of looms. You will see me demonstrating on a kiss loom because that's my favorite. However, the technique is not just for any one kind of loom. I have some wonderful pictures that my friend Julie Greenfield has allowed me to use in this video that show you how she's making this same exact cable using round looms and doing a beautiful job of it. So whatever loom you have a really good time with this cabling method. Here's what you'll see me making in this video. And this is the poncho for an American Girl doll. But here are some other things that I think you could do with the technique. A headband, a purse, big or small, and knitted with the cables going either direction. If you were to knit this one and you want the cables going around the purse, you cast on here, knit all the way around and seam it on the side, and then work the cables sideways. This one you knit from bottom to top. You could make a child or adult size poncho along the same lines as this, but with more cables. You could make a hat. I would envision this done sideways knitted garter stitch going this way, and then short rows to create the crown, and then of course the faux cable an inch or so from the edge. That's my idea. You can work this up the center of a traditional sweater or vest. And I really like the idea of using this on pillows. Now, here's a quick summary of how I'm getting the American Girl doll poncho on this loom or any 19 peg kiss loom. If you have more than 19 pegs, that's okay. You just have to have at least 19 pegs. And although this is the regular gauge, you could do it on the small gauge with 3 or 4 washers added to match the gauge of this loom. I did the casting on and some of the binding off camera, but basically we're using all 19 pegs, knitting on the first 6 and the last 6, so you have to cast all of those on, but with 7 in between not working. Knit 80 rows garter stitch. Garter stitch is knit 1 row, purl 1 row, so it comes out exactly the same on both sides. And then bind off, and I'll show you how to do that in the video, and you'll end up with this piece of fabric. But the same basic technique, you could end up with a piece of fabric suitable to any of these other projects. Let's look at how we get this fabric. I cast on by simply E-wrapping. You can use any cast on you want. For the first 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pegs of this 19 peg loom. Then I skipped 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and I cast on the remaining 6. And because I skipped it, a strand of yarn just stretched between the 6 peg segments. I am demonstrating this to you on this Kiss loom. This is a Kiss regular gauge loom with no washers and worsted weight yarn. But I want to make it very clear that the technique will work on any loom if you have enough pegs to knit a few, skip a few, and knit a few for the distance that you want. Here's what I'm doing. I'm slipping the first stitch of every row because it makes this nice neat edge to do that. So we're not going to knit that one. That's what slipping means. We are going to knit the next 5, skip, just running the yarn behind the pegs, the next 7, and knit the next 6. And every row moving from left to right will be like that. So we'll knit these over. Now to make our edges look nice, we want knit stitches up each edge. And we're going to slip the first stitch of every row. So here's how that works. This one will have to be knitted on the return row, even though the rest of them are purls. On the knit row, everything's knitted, so this one gets knitted. On the return row, everything gets purled, but we will slip this stitch so it still has only a knit stitch on it. Now we're going to purl everything except the first stitch and the last stitch, and of course the skipped pegs between. We never ever are going to do anything except carry the yarn behind those pegs. This can be knitted in a bulkier yarn if you want to, or in a thinner yarn. You could even use a sock gauge loom. Get 7 or 8 stitches per inch and it'll still work the same. The size of your cable will vary by 2 features: the number of pegs that you leave blank and how many loops you use at one time when you're chaining them up. I'll show you that in a minute. And those 2 things will determine how big the faux cable appears to be. For a little baby something, using this same yarn, I might only skip 3 pegs, so I had a smaller cable. But for a big dramatic thing, say on a pillow, I might even skip more pegs. We're purling all of the stitches on the right to left row, and this will be true every single row, except the very last stitch in the row is knitted as I described. So we get a nice column of knit one, slip one up this edge, and knit one, slip one up this edge. We are actually ready now, having knitted quite a few rows of this, to bind off and work the cable, which is so fast you'll just be astonished. So I'll finish binding off and get back to you when I'm done. Here we are. I only bound off half of my stitches because one way to finish this cable is to bind it off along with the other knitting. But I wanted this part with the strands to be free so that I can finish that cable. And on the Kiss loom that I'm using, I wouldn't have had quite a comfortable amount of room. So I just bound off the first half, and I'm holding them on a spare crochet hook. No problem there. And we will work with the remainder. Here is the secret to a neat beginning. I have already experimented, and I know that I'm going to latch up 3 strands at a time. I'm going to use this rug latch tool. It's like a giant latch needle. See? If you don't have one, and anybody who wants one can have one, they're available cheaply at the craft stores, but if you don't have one right now, just use a good-sized crochet hook. I'm going to take these first 3 strands and put a twist into them. See that? This will make the bottom edge of the cable neat, and the tool goes into that twist. Well, into the loop formed by the twist. Now, 3 strands at a time, grab them and crochet them through. This is just like making a chain with any kind of crocheting. I'm going slowly so that you can see and I can see that I do get 3 strands at once, only 3 strands at once, and that they are the next 3 strands in line. With these long floats dangling hither and thither, sometimes it's not as obvious as you would think. But if you go slowly and pay attention and stretch out the work a little bit ahead of yourself, as I'm doing here, it's not difficult. You just have to do that. Sometimes one of them tries to drop back out of the way. Watch for that. That one tried. Pull through. Pretty easy, huh? No crossed stitches whatsoever. And if you make a mistake, we can check and see if I did. Oops, I did. All I have to do is ladder back and correct it. No harm done. I'm almost back to my mistake. Okay. That loop is okay. There we go. Up we go. It can be a good idea to flip it over every row and make sure that you don't mess up. Here I am just about finished. After making this 3-strand chain, loop in the chain, I only have 2 strands left. That's okay. I'll just chain them up. And now what I need to do is hang these 2 things back on the loom to finish binding off. I'm going to treat that pair of strands that form the loop as a single strand for it, and just hang it on a peg like any stitch. There's the last bound off stitch. There we go. Here's the working yarn. I was binding off with the transfer method, so I will just continue in that method. That's move 1 stitch a peg over, wrap that peg, knit over all the loops on it. In this case, of course, there was an extra one because we hung the final 2 loops of our faux cable. And we'll get this off and see what it looks like. I like true cables too, but faux cables can be a lot of fun if you're either not a fan of true cables or something about the design or the yarn makes them really difficult to work with. Cotton yarns, for example, have so little stretch and resilience that they're considerably harder to cable than woolens or acrylic yarns. So this is something you might want to do for cotton yarn. There we go. And of course, eventually I'll just weave in that yarn tail. The wrong side is uneventful, doesn't look like much, but the right side is fabulous. Looks very much like the effect of a cable. It stands out from the background fabric.